All right. So first things first, we have our new color scheme. So this is some of our new branding for ServiceNow that I adopted for the work group. Welcome everybody to our February 2nd meeting. And I'm going to take you through a little bit about some of the changes that we're making this year. And this will kind of, for all the new people that are here today, this will kind of explain what we've been doing and how we're changing it a little bit this year. So we do have these bi-weekly meetings, and they're hour-long meetings, and nothing's changing with that part. We're going to stick with those bi-weekly meetings so far, right? This is kind of proposed changes now that I'm working on with my manager. The big goal has been to knock down the barriers of stand away in digital service delivery. And one of the things we want to switch over to, especially as this full life cycle comes in, is digital transformation, which is kind of a click up from the digital service delivery. So it's not only the services that you're delivering, but the big thing on digital transformation, the big takeaway, if those of you haven't really gone into it too much, is you're rethinking the business models, right? So you're creating new business models, new ways of doing business as you work on these new services. I think a lot of that goes without saying, but it's just calling it a different thing, right? Because we are reimagining the way that we're doing these services. The mission, again, slightly tweaked, right? We bring digital transformation in, a level up from digital services. And you'll see how some of the content that we're going to present to you over the coming months actually bring some of that in. We do share the work, and there's going to be some slight changes here. I'm getting my hand slapped a little bit from putting it on Google Drive. So we do have to make that. I don't know if I'll move it to a community or what we're going to do with it yet, but everything that you see today that's on the Google Drive, and that Google Drive is in the emails I send out, but everything you see today that's in there, we're going to move somewhere else. So that'll be all of our recordings, all the material that's been developed by anybody in the work group over the last 3 years. And then also the shared instance, which we're going to leave the same way. So there's a shared instance, and anybody in the work group who wants to go on there, I'm going to show a little bit of stuff in there today. We do give them an admin login. Now, the thing that's going to be a big change here is I changed jobs last year, and I moved over to the enterprise architecture team. And a lot of stuff that we're doing here is in that architecture domain. So we're kind of shifting gears a little bit to bring that whole team over. So we have about 30 people, and that'll let us mix the content up a little bit more, get a lot more contribution from different EAs that are working in different industries. Where I'm really focused in state and local and higher education, we can bring in some different perspectives and get a much broader perspective from these really mature industries like energy. But I'll still be presenting from time to time. It's just we'll have a better mix of enterprise architects that are bringing content to the. We also still want as much or even more of the content from you guys. So we still want speakers, which we haven't had any this year so far, but we do want to get that mix of, it'd be nice to do one where somebody from the architecture team or product management team like Caitlin is speaking, and then one where we have a customer segment where they talk about their progress. To me, that's the ideal mix, is that we have, even on the meetings, we could split it half and half. So we're doing some kind of, most of the stuff we're doing is theoretical stuff, and then we have the real world stuff that we're seeing from the rest of you. And then we will have executive sponsorship here, so that'll let us do a little bit more things. And I'm still going back and forth with Jeff. He's going to be coming on our call about what that means. So what we'll get for the sponsorship and the different help we'll get to get more contribution and bring more people into the group. But one of the things for sure, right, is he has said that we can definitely get more people from our team that are bringing content to show you how they're pushing digital transformation forward in all of their accounts. So for everybody that's new, that's a little bit of background. And if you aren't new, if you could just go put a note inside of the chat so that I could recognize all the new people and everybody could say hello, because we used to go through a list of new people, but this year we're getting a little bigger. So we don't want that introduction segment to take up a lot of time. So if you do want to speak, or if it's just to introduce yourself, go ahead and put it in the chat for now. And we'll make sure that you get recognized in the newsletter, and we welcome you appropriately. All right, so to jump into the agenda for today, the thing that's been a big topic of discussion this year is citizen developers. And we're talking a lot, what I did last week, if those of you that didn't catch it, there's a recording on our Google Drive, and I will send out a newsletter that'll have that recording in it. And Mitch, thanks for the reminder. I got a little behind on that, so appreciate that. But I'm going through with a couple of accounts, a real forward-looking state that I'm working with. I don't know if they're on the call today, but it's the state of Montana. And we're really trying to think about how do we, in the spirit of digital transformation, how do we redo this business model that's been the same way for years, right? People come to you and say, hey, I want a new application, and you're IT, and you say, okay, I can give you, here's a Drupal website that you need, or, here's something that you can go build your own service, right? We want to try to move the lines a little bit on that so that we provide a better service out. And that's what bringing citizen developers in is part of that change in the business model, right? For letting somebody develop a new service. And we want to go through, I went through that beginning part last week. I want to take it the next level this week, because we're actually doing some of this with Montana right now. And it's really interesting. I hope to get them to speak on here, but it's really interesting the way we have to, the parts we have to think about. And I'll take you through a little bit of that today. And then I want to open it up for a roundtable. So I want to save at least the last 20 minutes. If you do want to speak just about what's going on in your area and where you plan on moving, whether it's in CSDM or in digital transformation in general, I want to just get some feedback so that I'm presenting the right content here. I'm asking the right people to speak at the right time. So I haven't done that in a while, where I went around the horn and we just said, hey, if you want to come on and speak or just drop something in the chat. I need to do a sync here to make sure I'm not going too far off the reservation with what everybody else is doing with some of this content we're bringing up. And so let's jump right into our first topic, which is the late stages of the digital service. And what I intended to do here was go in really a continuation from last week and go really deep on it. But I think a couple of this was, 2 steps forward, 1 step back is really the way I'll explain it. For those of you that didn't see last week, I'll give you a little bit of a recap first. And so the way that we're looking at this, providing these services with citizen developers, is there's 2 entry points that you come in at. It's an internal service where it's an employee service, or it's an external service where it's your students or your citizens or your customers that are coming in, or your patients for some of you on the call, right? So there's that external facing side like we see over here in South Dakota's website, or the internal side, which you have more of your employee services that are all in one spot. Important thing to mention here, this employee center is available to everybody now. And what it's meant to do, it's not meant to be an IT portal. So you had Service Portal before. Service Portal is in this little link here in IT. That's your old Service Portal. But the idea here is to build an employee service center so that you can, all the services that the employee needs can be brought into here, whether it's IT or not. Any digital service for an employee could be leveraged through this portal. It gets interesting. I know a lot of you from higher education, where students go, right? Or students, because sometimes people treat students internally, but really the students are customers as well. So it gets interesting to see which ones they land in. Moving on from that, so we want people to be able to come in now, and this is where we get into reinventing the business model that's been this way for years, right? We're trying to blow up something that's pretty old and pretty well set. Is how do you bring new services up? And what is a new service, right? A new service is usually going to be some type of intake, for the request for service, whether it's to fix something or request something. And then there you need to process that request. Right? So there's some pretty basic pieces that come in, and then it gets really complex sometimes too, if you need new tables and new data structures to support that and multiple integrations. But what we're looking at right now is how do we enable some of these external areas, other departments or agencies or even schools to come in and leverage our ability to deploy new services. Right? This is really where the citizen developer persona is a new one that kind of fits in that area of low code, no code. So citizen developers should be able to come in, and we want to enable them to do a bunch of things so the developer doesn't, everything doesn't get dropped on the developer. It's like, okay, here's 30 things I want to do in my business area. I want to go ahead and drop them all in a queue. And then that ServiceNow developer is stuck developing my form. They got to build the workflow. They got to do all the business requirements. So that ServiceNow team gets stretched really thin. So when we talk about switching the business model, we're trying to take some of those responsibilities and move them out to the business. A big topic we went over last year and the year before, for those of you that are in a group, is Service Owner 101. So not only are we trying to move the development responsibilities into the organizations, but also when the services get built, we don't want the responsibility of the ownership to land back on the ServiceNow team, because that doesn't scale. And so not only do we want to be able to go ahead and have a citizen developer, but we also want to have a citizen service owner, right? Somebody own that service in that other area. So what we've been doing is we've been thinking about the process. And last week I demoed where you can come request a new service in prod. Instructions will be sent to you as a citizen developer, right? This is in instructions. You get an email back and it says, okay, this is how you can go ahead and build out your service. And it starts with the form, right? That intake in one of those two places, in the portals or the mobile apps, whatever you have, that system of intake. I'm just using the portal as an example. So then the instructions are sent to tell the citizen developer, right? Somebody outside the ServiceNow team, how do you go ahead and get this thing started? They're able to come in because when I send the instructions in email, they have a link to go edit what that looks like in development. And then they also have an ability to promote it to acceptance test. Right? So this is what we talked about last time, because after it gets built, right, the form is you're only part of the way there. You still have to be able to work with that ServiceNow team to make sure it's pushed through properly. You're not going to let the agencies go ahead and promote things into test and then eventually into prod. There might be a need to go ahead and say that, hey, these people that this team that's accepting these new requests, they're licensed or not licensed. So you might want to say, okay, this is how much you're going to get charged back because there's 10 people that are answering that request. And out of those 10 people, 5 of them are already licensed, but we need to put 5 more licenses on for your department. And then there's a process for ongoing revisions on that service, right? So I need to come back in, and maybe I developed the form now for version 1, but as that citizen developer, I still want a way to come back into dev and do the next version, right? And help out with those pieces. So what we did is we created a request, and this is still the recap from last time, but we created the request on a portal where we can come in and create a citizen case for my department. And then you can request that. And then what happens with this request is I built a workflow, and this is all productized, right? So you can download what I built in the demos on a GitHub link. But basically what it'll do is it'll run a workflow, and that person that requested this case on the front, right? They're going to go ahead and get an email, and it's going to say, click here if you want to go to development. We built you a case in development so that you could start working on it. And we added a few things in there already. Like, we don't want you to have to add a username and a password, or a username and an address and a telephone number. We already built that for you, and you're able to click on that link and go see what it looks like today. So if you were to just hit the promote to dev button, right, you would promote that thing without any edits into production just by virtue of the workflow. Now, if you need to edit your case, you can click on this, and this will let that citizen developer go in, and it'll drop them right into the editor for that new case that got developed from that request on the previous page. And then I had coming soon, this is the part where I'm going to go over today, where we said, okay, how do we promote this thing? How do we go into testing or prod? And then how do we submit the ongoing requests for development assistance, either after I submit it, I do the initial version, I want development assistance, or before I submit it, the initial version, I want development assistance. So you need a way to be able to go ahead and request that. And then there's the chargeback part, right? If we want to do that part, if you are charging back your schools or your agencies or your departments, you need a way to tell them that you're going to require these licenses in order to bring this service live. And it's really nice because we can automate all those pieces, right? We have a listing of who's licensed and who isn't licensed. And we have a team on that initial request. I don't know if you saw that, but it said select the group that will be accepting these cases. So that's the actual team that would need to be licensed. So we have all the information in this initial form on what the name of the new service is. We have the information about where it goes, like what directory, the top level directory it goes in. And then we know where to land that whole form based on this, right? So we're going to control those top level directories, but then we're going to let them add subdirectories underneath if they need to. Anybody have any questions on that so far? Because I'm going to take this to the next level and show you where we ran into snags with this. All right. All right, so now we do have that enabled, right? So what I did here is I took that and I stretched it out a little bit. I said, this isn't realistic. And we kind of knew that in the beginning, right? This is kind of the, I like that there's a development methodology where you throw a string across the river so that you could build a bridge around it. This is that string across the river, right? Is this kind of citizen developer flow here. Now, what we talked about with one of the states I've been working with is when somebody does come in and they request in prod, right? So they go to a service catalog and they want to say, I want to build a new service for my department. And after that, we need to do some type of review. One thing we don't want somebody to do is come and reinvent the wheel of something we already did in central IT. What we've seen, like a travel request, was a good example that I saw just this week. Well, you know, if I have 75 departments and 60 of them are building their own travel requests, that's some technical debt that we don't want. So before I send the developer instructions about going ahead and building their own form out and let them just have at it, we want to make sure that that hasn't been done already. So if we want to do an architectural review when they submit that form, before we give them that email that I just showed you. We also want to get an analyst involved so that they can make sure that they elaborate on the requirements for that service as in parallel with that developer creating that new form. Right, so what I'm working on here now, and I'm not going to go in super deep onto all the pieces, but I'm going to do a little demo for you. I want to put this chunk in here, the architectural review and the assignment of the analyst before I send the instructions to that citizen developer, right? So we're introducing some governance here, and it's really going to help the agency or department a lot, right? Because you don't want to go, they might create a whole form and then it lands in your queue and it says promote this thing to prod. It's like, wait a minute, we've been working on one of these for 3 years over here in this other department. Right, so that piece is really important, and over time we should have most of what we need built. The other example we had the other day where they were building an internal service, and it was to do contract management. Well, ServiceNow has that on the platform already, right? So we want to put the brakes on here before the citizen developer goes off the reservation, right, and develops their own contract management solution where they can put those contracts in. Right. So basically what we have is 2 concurrent value streams here that we're reinventing. And I know I did a really poor job with these value streams, so some of you ITIL people might be cringing, but we want to let that citizen developer, we want to empower them so that they build the form, they can be able to refine the definition, right? And that definition, this would be in an idea record, right? So we want to let them control or refine the narrative that they have that they're building this form for on what they want to happen with that form downstream. And then we want to make sure that they have a way to continuously improve on that service that they're bringing in to the portal, either the internal or external portal. And then we have that other value stream where the ServiceNow team needs to know how they interact with these citizen developers. right? Because we need to make sure that this is like a hybrid team, right? You might even have the internal service, the central IT team. You might even have a third one here where they're bringing in a partner to help build this new service out, right? So the partners might get involved at this point too. So it's really important to say, okay, what is the role these citizen developers play? And then we've also been talking more, which is really interesting, is besides the citizen developers and the service owners that are in the organizations, right? We're enabling those two new roles, sort of new roles, right? Because in ServiceNow, most of this responsibility used to all get dropped on that ServiceNow team. So now we're saying, okay, we're giving you this ownership to develop your own forms and your own workflows and own your own services and dictate their futures, right? Don't come back to IT saying, oh, this is terrible, right? What you're doing. It's like, no, you own what we're doing and what it looks like and how it's getting built. And that assignment of ownership is something they want, right? They're doing these somewhere else. They're building their own apps and own services somewhere else, right? And then on the ServiceNow side, like I said, we want to be able to look at how that comes in. Now, some of the work we did on the bottom part is, introduce those things into the governance stage where we say we got to go out and get some architectural review before we let them start, but also how these bounce through on records. And so as we provide the requirement oversight, when that person hits click on I want to build a new service, instead of getting an email that tells you to go, here's the in development, here's that service, we also want to be able to create an idea so that there's an idea being managed and that idea is being assigned or this is a body of work now that an analyst either on the ServiceNow team can go actually look at. And that analyst can work on the idea and at some point they'll promote it to a demand for work. Because even if a citizen developer is building their own stuff, that doesn't mean that the ServiceNow team doesn't have any work. There still has to be that demand will likely turn into an epic, right? I have a new form that I want to create for the one we did last week was illegal hunting. So there's an illegal hunting epic, and then you're able to define the stories on that illegal hunting. The stories might be that I am a citizen developer that needs to move my new service to production, right? And then that you might be doing that one on the development team, on the ServiceNow team, right? So we need to move this work through and make sure this work is organized properly, right? The governance process on it. And then at the end, we want to make sure that we're able to jump in and at least give them a cue to say, hey, I'm developing this form and I'm stuck. I'm hung up on a really hard piece on the form because I need to make this dependent field or it needs to look up this crazy reference table. Or I need to do a more advanced workflow than just approvals, which it lets me do in my citizen development area. And so this is the part I think we start at least getting a model where we let those citizen development teams mesh with our ServiceNow teams. All right, and I think, okay. So let me jump out now and I'm going to go into a little bit of a demo for you and show you where we are with this. Now, the idea starts with we need to get everything off of email, right? If they need a new, they need to come in and they need to say, I need to digitize my service for my department, my school, my agency, whatever it is. I need to digitize my service. So there is a way today, there's another way of starting, like you can go into the ideation queue and maybe create an idea for a new service. But this one, the citizen developers coming in saying, I know how to do this and I want to digitize my own service. I know what my role is in this because I've been trained as a citizen developer. So I'm able to help grease the skids on this process. I'm able to do a lot of it myself and start building it. Somebody's not on mute. All right. So that's so the first thing I want them to be able to do, and I changed this a little bit, right, is come in and I say, I want to digitize the service. And the first thing we know when you come in to digitize our services is I want to be able to create an internal service or an internal service or an external service. The external service one's a little bit easier because the internal service one, there's a whole bunch of other stuff I run into, like the examples I gave you. Hey, I wanted to create a travel request. Well, so does all 60 other departments. Or I want to create a contracts review process. Well, so do 50 other departments, right? So this one is going to be a lot of existing technology that we have to look at. When you come and create an external facing service, one of the things you need to do in the beginning is I need to name this service. So what will our citizens or students, what will our customers see? And then I'll do students this time because I'm doing a grade change request, right? So I want to create a new grade change request for my student, and then this will allow students to change their grades, right? And so it's a little bit more of a description. And then where do I want to put this in that catalog? I'm doing it. Yeah, students are external here, right? In this case, because this is an external service. So let's say I want to put those in services, and I want to create a new subcategory in that catalog. Underneath that, I want to create the name of this. I'm just going to call this under services. I'm going to do student services. Okay. I don't need a map for this because that's not really a geographical thing. And then who is the group that's going to get these student service requests? Well, it's going to be some crazy group that I don't have one set up. The application analysts are going to get these requests for student grade changes. And now I go ahead and request this. And what it's going to do, it's going to send me an email. It's going to go through a flow, and that flow is going to do a series of things, right? So if I go through this flow, what it's doing is it's executing this process request for the new external service. And the first thing it does, it's going to go down and it's going to get those catalog variables. So it's going to scrape those variables off the case name. But what I did is, if you notice, I added a new field here, service description. So because I added that new field from last week, we want to slide that over in our flow and say, I want to use that service description as part of my workflow. Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is, as I go down, I want to set some flow variables. So I'm going to tell it where my development environment is. And then what we had it doing last week, right, is right away I would go ahead and dev, and I would go to my remote system from prod, and I would create a new subcategory in dev. So I'd start building that whole new form for the citizen developer to come in and start building it. Now, what we want to do is we want to introduce after this. We don't want to let that happen, right? Because what we want to do is we want to introduce our governance here. So if I introduce governance, what I'm going to probably do, right? Because I have that request that came in and triggered this, that request for that new external service. So what I probably want to do here is I want to define a new action, and I want to create a catalog task. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a task on here, and the new task is going to be my governance task. So the requested item that came in is the triggered request item record, right? So this requested item came in, and it gave me all that information that I need to go ahead and process that request for the new service. But what I want to do now is I want to create a catalog task, and I want to do architect review for new service, right? So I'm going to create a catalog task on here that's going to tell the architect to review this request that came in, right, which is our top level request. So they have all the information now from the people submitting that request. Right, so that gives us that task that comes in. Now, what I want to do on this task now is I want to take that task I created as my governance, right? I want to create a new thing here, and I want to do, I want to create a new action that says for approval. Right, so this ask for approval, what do I want to ask? What do I want to ask for approval on? Right, so when I come in and ask for approval, I want to ask an architect team. I want to ask them to approve this catalog task that's saying this citizen developer can start work on this item. And so what I can do on ask for approval here is I could now take that step 3, right? If I scroll down to step 3, it's that catalog task. So I say, I want to ask for approval on this catalog task. Right? And then what will happen here is, so the approval rules, so I want to ask for approval, and I want to say anyone approves. And what I could do here is I could create, if I had an architect group that would accept these, I would send this approval to the architect group. All right. So I'll say anyone approves. All right. So approve or reject. I'm always going to approve it, so it's just a matter of when I approve it. Okay, so now what this is going to do is this is going to stop my workflow right here, and it's going to send that request out to the architect team so that they could. I'll just add a user here, and I'll add myself. Right. So now they have to go ahead and review this. So when I do this, let me activate this real quick and just show you the difference now. And then we'll switch over. I got about 7 minutes left. So what will happen now when I submit this request in the front, what will happen now is that it will go ahead and our workflow is going to change from going from here to sending instructions. It's now going to change because it's going to ask the architect to review it. Now the architect might need to call them and say, look, we got something else. They might say, yeah, this is a form that is really a one-off and it's nothing we've ever done for citizens before. So go ahead and develop your form on a new case. Or they might say that there's, the architect has to know all the products available on the platform already. They should have the broad oversight on everything that's been developed. And that's the idea here, right, is to make sure it goes through that process before the developer goes off building stuff that's already been built. Okay, so when I have this flow, and it sometimes, because it's getting pretty big, it takes a while to enable them. But what will happen is when I come in, you'll see when we submit this new case here. I should have waited and submitted it. So let's go back to technology service, and I just want to show you where it waits on that architect. Right, so if I go back to digitize my services, create an external facing service. This is a new service for a citizen, and I'll just drop that in the description there. And then the next thing I would put in here, it's under services. I'm not going to create a new subcategory, so I'm going to use an existing subcategory, and then no map, and then I'll pick my group. Right now, when I request this, what happens now is we have 10074. So if I come up to my flow designer and I go ahead and I look at the executions, it's 11:35 here right now. So you see this one is queued, right? So that request came in from the catalog, just queued my workflow. And then what will happen on this workflow as it executes is it's going to go ahead and it's going to wait. It's going to wait for this architect, right, to go ahead and approve this, right? So you'll see that I stalled the workflow right here before that email goes out. So I just want to walk you through that piece so we can see it. So now my operation. There we go. So my operation just happened, and you see right here, it's waiting. It's waiting. It created the catalog task. I messed up one thing. It would ask for approval here, and then we would continue it going. One of the things you have to do when you create these new catalog tasks is you have to unset it. And I don't know why this is in here. I'm still trying to figure this part out. But on the catalog task, I have to take this wait flag off. And that would have gone all the way through. So I won't go back and trouble you with the approval and everything as the architect, but basically I could wear the architect hat. It would send me an email, right, that there's a new approval waiting for me to let this citizen developer request go through. And then the next step that I would do to further build out this workflow is after I ask for approval. Now, once it comes down in that the architect approves it, the next thing I want to do is come down here and create another action. And I'm going to want to go ahead and I'm going to want to create a new record, right? So I want to create a new record for idea, right? So I want to put an idea in the idea queue and then assign that idea to an analyst. So that's the next step I would put in my workflow. So that I just wanted to show you an example. Like this is a service we're building, right? Our service is to let somebody come in and build their own service, and we're managing this as the ServiceNow team, right? So I wanted to just show you, now I'd put an idea in here for the analyst, and then the analyst would have a way to take that idea and say, okay, let's promote it to a demand because we have the citizen develop the form. So now let's promote it to a demand because they're moving it through in production. Right, so basically what we want to end up with here is we want to end up with a digital input form for requesters, right? So people coming in, or those external people in this case, we want to view the completed forms when they come in. So we want to have the fulfillers have a landing spot. So we have to determine what that site is, right? Which citizen developers can do that sometimes. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes the ServiceNow team will need to help them. Then we also want to automate as much as we can in that process. In the beginning, there might not be a workflow. It might just be, hey, I want to intake this request and I want to drop it in somebody's queue. Later, we're going to say, okay, this request is more complex. We want to approve it. Or we don't want to have to go out to this other system to do that step, that validation, right? So that's another key piece to this. And then at the end, what we're providing, if you watched last week's video, but what we're providing on the back end of this is we're automatically building the common service data model components, right? So as this new service request gets built, or in this case, the student grade change we did, or the illegal hunting, what'll happen is you'll also have these managerial views that automatically get built for you. You don't have to come in and build these after the fact. So the idea here is you'll be able to see these in the plan phase. So I'll see the demands come in as that demand work stream continues on the ServiceNow team. And I'll also be able to see once it goes into operations, I have that pre-built view so that I can see it on that service owner side, right? So that service owner that's in that agency, they should be expecting this as output, not just this, right? Not just the piece where they have their fulfiller can fill those requests, but they should also be requiring or expecting as part of our service these managerial views that are now available. And not only can they see it in production, right? But I think it's next week. I'll try to ask Caitlin when we're getting DPM. But as soon as that comes out, you'll be able to show it to them in the plan phase. You'll be able to go to build phase and show them the epics and stories. And then you'll be able to go in and show them in the run phase when the actual external people start hitting that new request. All right, so I'm going to end there for now. That is basically a quick review of the process that I'm pushing through. I plan on working this over the year because I see a lot of need for it. They're asking, they're like, okay, these citizen developers can do some things, but they can't do all the things. So what's the governance process for creating this hybrid team that we're talking about here, right? And that's really what I'm trying to get through as my contribution to the work group this year, and to a lot of the state customers that I'm working with. Anybody have any questions I can answer? And it's before we jump into the roundtable.
Yeah. Hey, John, it's Jeff. Question: When I'm going to call it this CSDM wizard, when is this going to come out, and which version is it tied to?
So right now, this is me building something that you'll have to build yourself, right? You're going to have to own it. So what I'm doing is I'm building all this work that I'm doing. It's going into a GitHub repo. So this is a digital services work group thing, right? It's not a ServiceNow thing. So if you go to GitHub, all the stuff I'm doing code drops for all the stuff that you're looking at. I'm doing code drops into this public service template. Now, what you can do is if you want to install this template, I give you instructions here how to do it on a dev instance or at your own instance. It gives step-by-step instructions to all the configurations that I'm including, including the stuff from today. So the stuff from today is not in here yet, but in the next couple of weeks, I'll have that, those next pieces in. So everything you saw, everything I showed you with the catalog items and everything, that will all come out in one big chunk in this GitHub repo. So you need a developer to come in and be able to go ahead in Studio in ServiceNow and import that repo. So what you would do here is you would fork that repo, then you would go to our Studio, open that, and then you could connect to that GitHub repo. So it takes about an hour to do it. If you guys are stuck on it, on forking the repo, import from source control and you go right to that repo that I showed you. So everything I'm doing, I'm packaging. I'm not just doing it and dropping it on the instance, I'm trying to package it and get it all into here. Now, as I release a new version of this, right, as I put changes in here, like I have been doing for the last year, all these things are changes. They'll come out with little YouTube videos on them. So there's videos in all these sections. And then what you can do is you can just update it. So as I drop into the main branch of this, as I drop changes, you can update your GitHub repo in your instance, right? So it's not on the store. It's not on a ServiceNow website. It's something that you could take and productize for your own agency or department or whatever. I'll put that in here in case anybody wants to take a look at it. And the videos kind of tell you how to import it and everything. Does that help?
Yes, thank you, John.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Hi, John. Question about the agenda. So we had some CMDB item over there. So will you plan to do it, to cover it in the next meeting, or what's the plan for that?
See on the agenda?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I shared last week on this, so the
discussion points about the CMDB components, like approval and automation.
Yes, so this week I was going through to show you the promotion and approvals. Oh, the CMDB components for the yeah, I didn't show you that. Good point. Thank you.
No, it's all right. I'm just checking if the plans are for next time.
So what happened here? The CMDB components that would need to be approved. If I go into our, let me go into the email that got sent by. That's the part I forgot to trace through with you. So the email that got sent. For that grade change one I put in, this is the email that the workflow sent me. So we did that a little while ago. Now what it says is you can go into here and see the and edit the changes. So it's pushing it in. This is our prod system was Jay Spirko, but our dev system is this one. So that workflow built that catalog item out in the dev system. But if I go to the dev system, I can see the catalog item that the workflow built, and this is what I did in last week's session. So this is another area that needs to be promoted. Not only do you need to promote the catalog item, right? When the citizen developer is done. But what also happened here on this grade change request is that we developed in that same dev system, we developed the service offering. So on the back end piece, that's another piece that has to be promoted. So that's where the ServiceNow team comes in as well with those stories that created the components for the created. Yeah, those components for the I got the illegal hunting here, but illegal fishing, right? So these are the components that would come through on the back end and build out in that dev system. It would build out all these services that are required for those views. So it builds the service offering. It also builds the corresponding service if that's not built. So what we're doing here, the automation that happens on the common service data model is that it creates the relationship to the upstream service and the downstream application service, right? So as you create these new catalog items, it creates a service offering inside the catalog for them. So that's the part I forgot to show. Thanks for that.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I know it's a lot today, but I'm going to keep introducing over the year when it's my turn to speak on this group. I am going to keep introducing continuations and trying to give you updates on what I'm building here so that it becomes some point where you decide that you want to use this. You'll be able to just pull it down and at least start building your own product for providing these internal and external service creation services that you'll be able to come down and get a starting point here, or at least load this into dev and steal some of the workflows and things like that. Maybe the workflow that, like this one, is the one that builds that common service data model component that you were just asking about. This talks about that workflow that's in the code to build that. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So, Mitch, you want to start with what you guys are doing over there and update on USC? You still there, Mitch? All right. Anybody else want to come off mute and talk about what they're doing in CSDM or services or?
Hey, John, this is JP Sweeney. I work with Jacobs. Right now, we are starting our journey into sort of fixing some of the bad practices that we had. So our applications table, the CMDB CI Apple table, was used as a dumping ground in the past. Really bad practice for just CIs that needed to get created in a quick manner. So we're starting our journey of somehow either retiring those and creating proper configuration items through discovery and also through integrations. Very daunting task. The size of Jacobs is understated when it comes to just the nature of what we do through acquisition and divestiture, and so it's daunting. And I'll just say this for anybody who is staring at that mountain: if you have not started your journey, there's tons of great stuff already out there on the community sites, and of course all of the documentation. But yeah, it's daunting, and I'm really looking forward to figuring out some of the better ways that we can implement better practice or best practice by and through you and the other folks that will be presenting.
Are you finding some best practices in doing that, or using like a conversion button to move things from business services to app services, or looking at some of the different ways to build them?
So starting to that conversion and with the ability to have that CSDM module and application built in, I believe, what was it in Quebec? It's been a big help. But I hate to say we're starting at square zero, because I think it would be a hell of a lot easier than what we're looking at now in trying to, determine what still is, in the environment. How do we get it over without losing, historical data, and really looking at it from all of the things that we sort of built around bad practice that we're going to have to sort of tear down and then build back up again the right way.
Okay. And then do you have a new one? So you stop the bleeding from like new services coming in? Do you have a way to actually make sure that they're getting done the right way, or?
We're starting to, so that was opposed to, really diving into the cleanup aspect. I wanted to make the recommendation that we start doing it the right way going forward, so we don't continue to pile on to ourselves. And yes, so now we are at least following what we should have been doing a long time ago. But that's still, a trial in and of itself, because we're trying to correct, 25 years of bad behavior on how things were done, and especially 3 years of really bad behavior since our latest acquisition, where we merged ServiceNow instances. So yeah, needless to say, there's a lot of cleanup, but at least, with some of the documentation that's available, and some of the anecdotal stories that you hear from, other customers, and what their journey has been through, that has seemingly at least given us a direction on where to start in priority for the tasks at hand. Okay,
cool. Thanks for the update. And if you want to come on and kind of walk us through some of that, would you be willing to do that, or?
Absolutely. I would probably say I'd need about a quarter to feel comfortable that with what I'm showing is something that I believe in, and that would provide benefit to this group. But I absolutely would be interested in that.
All right. Yeah, because I'm sure there's a lot of other people that are in that same boat too, and some people that have gotten through it too.
And I hope to come out on that other side, and hope to give that information so other folks don't make the same mistake we did, and if you happen to, at least there's a way out. So
awesome.
Hope to help there.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Anybody else? What else is going on in other places? Anybody out from Montana?
Hey, John, this is Roland.
Hey, Roland.
How are you?
Good. You guys aren't too busy down there, are you?
No, I think you kind of captured, what the challenge we're taking on right now with trying to enable a lot of our, I think citizen developer is a terrible word for government, but that is what it is. All of our agencies, as we're not a consolidated IT state when it comes to, our app dev teams and a lot of the desktop support. So I think that John's kind of helping us lead that effort to, move an agency to a 100% digital aspect in a rather rapid timeline. So I think just, enabling that model that we can then extend, to our other agencies to, kind of rapidly move in that direction is probably our biggest priority moving forward here in the next few months.
And hopefully we can bring some of that stuff over, Roland, when we get do it all manual for now, just to make sure we get all the kinks worked out, but then we can start look at some of that automation maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, my ask of John and ServiceNow too is there's a lot of, confusion over what product to use for what process. So I think that's something they're helping us with too, kind of setting up some guardrails around, when do we build exclusively in CSM versus App Engine? When do we use the two in conjunction? Just literally taking that intake process and guiding agency developers, citizen developers down the right path, with us continuing to provide, that architectural oversight to make sure decisions are being made correctly.
It was really interesting right here too, when we looked at those internal services that, there's platform stuff like the contract and the
yeah, great call out.
Procurement. Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Roland. And then anybody else? Mitch, were you on? You were talking about some stuff you're doing. I think we lost Mitch though. All right. Anybody else want to give me an update? So I got some stuff to work on for you guys or bring in content. Anybody not making progress at all and are stuck on something?
So this is Dave Young from Clark County. We're making
Dave.
slow progress on the CMDB, right? We had that engagement with the ITOM and, you know, documenting our services. So we're looking forward to the next call with you, John, because we have some questions.
Yeah, the nice part on Dave's, one of the things that we're going to go over next time is that application service. So that application service and how do you make those attachments underneath, right? So there's the manual way, there's the tagging way. At one of the counties that we're working with, we're doing it where we're able to go ahead and discover with a dynamic query and then build the relationships off the dynamic query. And then there's the traditional service discovery method, right? Where you come down and you put a URL in after you discover all the technology components, and that from that URL you can walk down and then attach things, which is the ideal way because then it's all automated. So on Dave's team, we're doing a little bit of it now manually, but we're like, okay, how do we automate that so that if a new server gets added to our which one we're working on a property tax billing application. How do we make sure that gets added in automatically? So there's some challenges we're facing with traditional service discovery. So we're trying to kind of create a process for maturing as we go, right? Right, Dave?
Yep. And we're grateful for all your help, John. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, John. So do we expect you cover that topic in the next one that you have, or that's still kind of in future plans?
And that's more on the discovery part. There's another group that covers that. This is more around the services themselves. So we try to stay on the service delivery. So discovery and everything else. There's our ITOM team has a Tuesday call where they talk about that. So when I send the newsletter out, I'll make sure I put another link to that Tuesday meeting in there because that's a topic that they would cover. They specifically go down into that area.
Yeah, I would like to actually, when we have, I was thinking we will cover it, some examples, as you mentioned, for those application services and have they dynamically map in them. So I would like to extend that invite to some technical folks on my side. So once you have it ready, let me know. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. That would definitely be one a little outside our wheelhouse because we try not to dive into specific products here because you can go anywhere and get a CSM demo or get a, ITOM demo. There's a lot of those. We're trying to really stick to just that core service delivery piece here as much as we can.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have anything going on? Wow, we're over. Oh no, we're not over yet. One more. We got time for one more. Any of you consultants out there working on anything interesting with services too? All right, bunch of shy people on the call today.
Hey, John, I'll go next. So this
right.
is Darren from Hawaii Department of Transportation. We are, believe it or not, trying to transition from Lotus Notes into ServiceNow. And I think our biggest hurdle is tribal knowledge, having an older workforce, not being able to adapt quickly to some of the new stuff coming into ServiceNow. Mm-hmm. And then that old developer mindset that says, everything needs to be in one module instead of breaking up into smaller ones. So I think we're kind of stuck in a little bit of analysis paralysis. And so to break that down, we are looking at doing some outsourcing just to kind of bring in some outside talent to kind of help guide us and point us in the right direction. But yeah, we're trying to transition Lotus Notes, which has been around for hundreds of years, trying to convert that into some app engine tools. So yeah, it's been slow.
Yeah, perfect example. What I'm talking about today, right, is how do we push some of those responsibilities out so you're not doing it all, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and we were on that call together too. That's exactly where a lot of the municipalities want to go, right? When we did that call together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for leading the way, John.
Sure. Yeah. If I can help you with this too down in Hawaii, let me know, and I'll get with Scott, and we can put some of this stuff together for you.
Yeah, might call for a site visit maybe, huh?
Yeah. Class trip to Hawaii anytime. But except I can't get out of there still with all the restrictions, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's a little bit limited. Yeah. Give it time.
All right. All right, thanks. And if anybody else, anything else, drop them in the notes in the meeting or send me an email. I still need speakers like always. I need you guys to come up and, I mean, even if you're stuck or struggling, like that app service thing is a really good topic to migrate things over. Just drop me an email and I'll get you on the docket as soon as the next meeting. So I know Kaiser too. I don't know if they're on today, but they were talking about speaking last time. I know they're pretty mature in some of this, so it'd be good to get a mix of people that are stuck in the beginning and then people that are pretty mature. And then the stuff I'm talking about is CSDM 4.0, which is available, by the way. If you go on the CSDM, look up CSDM community, and you'll see the CSDM 4.0 white paper in draft, and you can go get that now. I'll also put a link to that in the newsletter, but if you want to not wait for my newsletter, you can go there, just do a search for it. And that's really interesting because that brings in all these early stages that I'm talking about now, right? Because before it only considered production in the CSDM. Now it has all those pre-prod stages. Next time I'll talk a little bit more about the CSDM parts inside of the digital products, right? Which that's the really interesting piece that we're going to come in. So the digital products today that I developed were the ones for the landing spots in the catalog. So if you remember, I was parking stuff in that services category. So it'd actually be a digital product called services, and that's where we would be dropping that downstream epic, right? So that's how everything connects back in the model, is because now we have those life cycle stages of things we can talk about as part of CSDM. The digital product being the big new one. So that's a topic for another day, and we'll pick it up at some point when my turn comes around again to speak. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.